Hi, it's Sue. Thanks for joining me for today's Bible reading for April 14th. And today I'm reading 1 Kings 6 and 7, just two chapters today. Verse 1. In the 480th year, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the second month, he began to build Yahweh's house. The house which King Solomon built for Yahweh had a length of 60 cubits, and its width 20, and its height 30 cubits. The porch in front of the temple of the house had a length of 20 cubits, which was along the width of the house. 10 cubits was its width in the front of the house. He made windows of fixed lattice work for the house. Against the wall of the house, he built floors all around. Against the walls of the house all around, both the temple and of the inner sanctuary, he made side rooms all around. And let me stop and say, this gets kind of detailed description of the construction of the temple. So I try to envision it, and it's not easy, but there are little details that pop out in here that are interesting to me and to me significant and even symbolic. And I want to say there are kind of like 3D virtual um, models of this on the internet. And I was trying to think of a good website, but I know there's also some really good walkthroughs on YouTube, which would probably be the easiest way to look if you want to see what the temple looked like, as far as we know what it looked like. And that will give a better visual while we're reading through here. So I'm looking forward to reading it because I want to pull out a few more tidbits out of here. It's almost impossible for me to comprehend the whole thing, but I like to find little gold nuggets while I'm looking through here. Okay, so it says the lowest floor was 5 cubits wide, and the middle was 6 cubits wide, and the third was 7 cubits wide. For on the outside he made offsets in the wall of the house all around, that the beams should not be inserted into the walls of the house. The house, when it came under construction, was built of stone prepped at the quarry, and no hammer or axe or any tool of iron was heard in the house while it was under construction. The door for the middle side rooms was in the right side of the house. They went up by a winding stair into the middle floor and out of the middle into the third. So he built the house and finished it, and he covered the house with beams and planks of cedar. He built the floors all along the house, each 5 cubits high, and they rested on the house with timber of cedar. Excuse me. Yahweh's word came to Solomon, saying, concerning this house which you are building, if you will walk in my statutes and execute my ordinances and keep all my commandments to walk in them, I will establish my word with you, which I spoke to your father, David. I will dwell among the children of Israel and will not forsake my people Israel. So Solomon built the house and finished it. He built the walls of the house within the boards of cedar, from the floor of the house to the walls of the ceiling. He covered them on the inside with wood, and he covered the floor of the house with cypress boards. He built 20 cubits on the back part of the house with boards of cedar from the floor to the ceiling. He built them for it within, for an inner sanctuary, even for the most holy place. In front of the temple sanctuary was 40 cubits. There was cedar on the house within, carved with buds and open flowers. All was cedar. No stone was visible. He prepared an inner sanctuary in the middle of the house within to set the ark of the covenant there. Within the inner sanctuary was 20 cubits in length and 20 cubits in width, 20 cubits in its height, and he overlaid it with pure gold. He covered the altar with cedar. So Solomon overlaid the house within with pure gold. He drew chains of gold across before the inner sanctuary and overlaid it with gold. Now you may remember what I said about how I believe that this gold had something to do with shielding the radiating glory of God, because gold is used in our nuclear power industry. No, in the nuclear power industry, it's concrete and water usually used for shielding, but gold is a potential shielding for neutron radiation. So that's my theory about why everything in there was overlaid with gold. So it says, in the inner sanctuary, he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. 5 cubits was one wing of the cherub, and 5 cubits the other wing of the cherub. From the tip of one wing to the tip of the other was 10 cubits. The other cherub was 10 cubits. Both the cherubim were of one measure and one form. One cherub was 10 cubits high, and so was the other cherub. He set the cherubim within the inner house. The wings of the cherubim were stretched out so that the wing of the one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other touched the other wall, and their wings touched one another in the middle of the house. He overlaid the cherubim with gold. He carved all the walls of the house around and carved figures of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers inside and outside. He overlaid the floor of the house with gold inside and outside. For the entrance of the inner sanctuary, he made doors of olive wood. The lintel and doorposts were a fifth part of the wall. So he made 2 doors of olive wood and carved on them carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and overlaid them with gold. He spread the gold on the cherubim and on the palm trees. He also did so for the entrance of the temple doorposts of olive wood and the fourth part of the wall, the 2 doors of cypress wood. The 2 leaves of the one door were folding, and the 2 leaves of the other door were folding. He carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and overlaid them with gold fitted on the engraved work. He built the inner court with 3 courses of cut stone and a course of cedar beams. The foundation of Yahweh's house was laid in the 4th year in the month of Ziv, in the 11th year in the month of Beul, which is the 8th month. The house was finished throughout all its parts according to all its specifications, so he spent 7 years building it. Chapter 7. Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house, for he built the house of the forest of Lebanon. Its length was 100 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits, on 4 rows of cedar pillars with cedar beams on the pillars. It was covered with cedar above over 45 beams that were on the pillars, 15 in a row. There were beams in 3 rows, and window was facing window in 3 ranks. All the doors and posts were made square with beams, and window was facing window in 3 ranks. Wow. Why did it repeat that? I don't know. Verse 6. He made the porch of pillars. Its length was 50 cubits, and its width 30 cubits, with a porch before them, and pillars and a threshold before them. He made the porch of the throne where he was to judge, even the porch of judgment, and it was covered with cedar from floor to floor. His house where he was to dwell, the other court within the porch, was of like work. He made also a house for Pharaoh's daughter, whom Solomon had taken as wife, like this porch. All these were costly stones, even of cut stone, according to measure, sawed with saws inside and outside, even from the foundation to the coping, and so on the outside of the great court. The foundation was of costly stones, even great stones, stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits. All above were costly stones, even cut stone according to measure, and cedar wood. The great court around had 3 courses of cut stone and a course of cedar beams, like the inner court of Yahweh's house and the porch of the house. King Solomon sent and brought Hiram out of Tyre. He was the son of a widow of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in brass, and he was filled with wisdom and understanding and skill to work all works in brass. He came to King Solomon, performed all his work. For he fashioned the 2 pillars of brass, 18 cubits high apiece, and a line of 12 cubits encircled either of them. He made 2 capitals of molten brass to set on top of the pillars. The height of the one capital was 5 cubits, the height of the other was 5 cubits. There were nets of checker work and wreaths of chain work for the capitals, which were on the top of the pillars, 7 for the one capital and 7 for the other. So he made the pillars, and there were 2 rows around the one network to cover the capitals that were on the top of the pillars, and he did so for the other capital. The capitals that were on the top of the pillars in the porch were of lily work, 4 cubits. There were capitals above also on the 2 pillars close by the belly, which was beside the network. There were 200 pomegranates in rows around the other capital. He set up pillars at the porch of the temple. He set up the right pillar and called its name Jachin, and he set up the left pillar and called its name Boaz. I think it's Jachin and Boaz. On top of the pillars was lily work, so the work of the pillars was finished. He made the molten sea of 10 cubits from brim to brim, round in shape. Its height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits encircled it. Under its brim around there were buds which encircled it for 10 cubits, encircling the sea. This is a big bowl, for lack of a better term. The buds were in 2 rows cast. When it was cast, it stood on 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, 3 looking toward the west, 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set on them above, and to all their hindquarters inward. It was a hand width thick. Its brim was worked like a brim of a cup, like the flower of a lily. It held 2,000 baths. I'm not sure how much water that is. I have to look it up. He made the 10 bases of brass. The length of one base was 4 cubits, 4 cubits its width, 3 cubits its height. The work of the bases was like this. They had panels, and there were panels between the ledges, and on the panels that were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubim, and on the ledges there was a pedestal above, and beneath the lions and oxen were wreaths of hanging work. Every base had 4 bronze wheels and axles of brass, and the 4 feet of it had supports. The supports were cast beneath the basin with wreaths at the side of each. Its mouth within the capital and above was a cubit. Its mouth was round after the work of a pedestal, a cubit and a half, and also in its mouth were engravings, and their panels were square, not round. The 4 wheels were underneath the panels, and the axles of the wheels were in the base. The height of the wheel was a cubit and a half cubit. The work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Their axles and their rims and their spokes and their naves were all cast metal. There were 4 supports at the 4 corners of each base. Its supports were made of the base. Its supports were of the base itself. In the top of the base there was a round band half a cubit high, and on the top of the base its supports and its panels were of the same. On the plates of its supports and on its panels he engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees, each in its space with wreaths all around. He made the 10 bases in this way. All of them had 1 casting, 1 measure, and 1 form. He made 10 basins of brass. 1 basin contained 40 baths, and every basin was 4 cubits, and on every one of them 10 bases, 1 basin. He set the bases, 5 on the right side of the house, 5 on the left side of the house. He set the sea on the right side of the house eastward and toward the south. Hiram made the basins, the shovels, and the basins. Basins, shovels, and basins. Why does it repeat that? So Hiram finished doing all the work that he worked for King Solomon in Yahweh's house. The 2 pillars, the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on top of the pillars, the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on top of the pillars, the 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on the pillars, the 10 bases, the 10 basins on the bases, the 1 sea, the 12 oxen under the sea, the pots, the shovels, and the basins, even these vessels which Hiram made for King Solomon in Yahweh's house, were of burnished bronze. The king cast them in the plain of Jordan in the clay ground between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon left all the vessels unweighed because there were so many of them. The weight of the brass could not be determined. Solomon made all the vessels that were in Yahweh's house. The golden altar, the table, and the showbread was on. The golden altar and the table that the showbread was on, of gold, and the lampstand, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, before the inner sanctuary, of pure gold, and the flowers, the lamps, and the tongues of gold. Cups, the snuffers, the basins, the spoons, and the firepans of pure gold, and the hinges both for the doors in the inner house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the house of the temple, of gold. Thus all the work of King Solomon did in Yahweh's house was finished. Solomon brought in the things which David his father had dedicated, the silver of gold and the vessels, and put them in the treasuries of Yahweh's house. And that is the end of today's reading. Thanks for joining me. God bless you today. See you tomorrow.